welcome to Restorative Yoga with or without ferrets. I'm grateful that you're here. I don't know about them, but I am. So this is Restorative Yoga, which is it's a very slow form of yoga. We're going to get into poses. We're going to stay a while. The thing that distinguishes it from yin is that we really want the poses to be very gentle and relaxed so that the whole body can unwind. So we're trying to physically allow the body to be supported enough that it can completely let go and relax. And then also we're trying to mentally and emotionally relax as well. So we're going to monitor the breath. We're going to monitor kind of the sensations that we're getting. We're going to try to stay as best we can in the most relaxed state possible. So there might be a little bit of sensation in the poses, but we're not going for sensation. We're going for relaxation. Hopefully that is, I hope I've articulated that well enough that that makes sense. So we need a bunch of soft, fluffy things generally. So you can use blankets, you can use pillows, you might use yoga blocks, whatever you've got that are kind of softer, so that if like your elbow isn't touching the ground, you can put something under it, or if your knees don't touch the ground, you can put something under it. And then also the props will help us do the pose itself. Now we're starting with a pose that is a little bit, can be a little bit more intense, especially in the upper back. And it's a back bend. It's basically like a fish pose if you're familiar with the regular yoga poses, or like upside down cobra. If you're not familiar with the fish pose, it's basically cobra upside down. If you took a cobra and flipped it, that would be the fish. So what you could do is you could take a blanket and roll it up, because this is going to go under your upper back. Now for me, rolling the blanket is fine, but it's a little bit more intense than if I fold the blanket. So if I take the same blanket and fold it twice so that it's a little flatter, this is more comfortable. So if you you get into the pose and you're really, really uncomfortable, you can play with the props to create a little bit, like you can even unroll it one time. So there's one less roll in the blanket, so you can find the right amount of sensation. So this is going under our upper back, kind of about where the shoulder blade, like the bottom of the shoulder blade lives. If you follow your rib cage around to the bottom of the breastbone and you draw a line down from the bottom of the breastbone, it'll run into the blanket somewhere. So it may not be right centered there, but you'll, like that general area, right about the middle of the back. Some people are going to be more comfortable with a little higher, some a little lower, so you're going to find your spot. And then you need something to put under your legs. I'm going to use this pillow. You could use another blanket rolled up, or a couple of throw pillows from the couch, whatever you've got handy. So this has got a fun name. I love the name of this pose. It's mountain stream, or sometimes I've heard it called babbling brook. I don't know about the babbling part, but it evokes an image, right, of water kind of flowing over rocks. So our body is kind of taking the role here of water, and then the props are the rocks. So I have a little elevation in my chest. I've got a little release in the hip flexors, and then we're going to stay here for a pretty good amount of time, somewhere in the 7-minute range. So there's a couple of little magical places that happen where the body kind of is given permission to let go a little bit more. So the first magical place is around 3 minutes or so. It's not exactly at, sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes a little later than that, but right in that zone. And then there's another one that happens after 5 minutes, usually for me between 6 and 7 or 8 minutes. So between 6 and 8 minutes. And then the body lets go again. So you'll have to do your own kind of little sleuthing to see if that's true for you, or if there is different timing that works better for you. So you may have to do some of these poses on your own for different lengths of time, kind of see what happens. But the first minute is just about like, can I get relaxed? What little adjustments do I need to do? Sometimes it helps to kind of draw a little bit of fabric or flesh out from underneath Like if your clothes are bunched up in your low back, that can be tricky. Similarly, if you've got junk in your trunk, sometimes a little, you can just kind of pulling the glute out to the side a little bit on either side helps release tension from the low back. I've got this pillow pretty close to the top of my thigh, but maybe down below, like not below the knee, but kind of in the knee area would be better for you. My arms are in this little cactus shape, but for you maybe a different shape would be better, like a T, or the arms down a little lower would be nicer. So that's the first minute, is just like, where's the sweet spots so that I can let go into the shape. And then for the next couple minutes, we're just going to breathe and be still. And if you want, I'm not going to play music over the internet because it's really data heavy and it makes everything choppy, but if you wanted to put on some soft music at your house, that's always nice, so that you can have a little ambient relaxation sound. As we stay for a wee bit longer, about halfway through, just notice if you are holding any tension in places that don't involve the pose at all, like the forehead, for example, or around the eye. Sometimes I find myself, it's almost like I'm trying to squeeze my eyeballs from my temples. There's just a little bit of pressure around that kind of side of the head, eye area. You can also check in with your lips, make sure the lips are soft and the teeth are slightly parted so there's no tension in the mouth. And then if there's something that's really uncomfortable and you've just been kind of dealing with it, go ahead and adjust it. And as we hold the pose for the second half, you'll be able to see whether there's a change. gonna stay for one more minute. So let's do 3 more breaths where we are. First part of this that I'm going to change is I'm just going to bring my feet in so that I can roll over to my side. So take the pillow out and then roll so I can prop up on an elbow. I'm going to pull this blanket out from underneath my upper back. And then I'm going to roll back onto my back. Oh, okay. So I like to do really like kind of gentle, slow movement, but I also, while I'm doing that, am paying attention. So can you feel how your upper back almost still feels like the blanket is underneath it? So, oh, it feels really nice to me to kind of pull the arms a little bit up so that I pull my shoulder blade away from the center and then kind of rock back and forth on that spot where the blanket was. Oh. Ooh, that is nice. Now, I like to do a kind of a variety of these kinds of upper back movements because, you know, if you lean over a sewing machine or a computer, whatever you might, the stove, a steering wheel, whatever you might do for a long period of time. And this is especially true of people who do like a working sort of movement where the arms are held in front of the body for a long period of time. So hairdressers, people who sew, people who drive, people working at a desk, that kind of thing. Often the back will kind of start to, the shoulders will roll forward so that the posture can be held a little more. It's almost like the body's trying to be more efficient. So it tightens up muscles in the front of the chest and the stabilizers for the shoulders that stabilize the arm bone going forward. So it'll literally hold us in that position with the muscle a little bit easier. We don't have to work hard to stay like that. So what we're doing when we do these kinds of poses where we elevate or change the back in some ways, we're trying to undo some of that habit so so our muscle kind of returns a little bit to its more neutral shape and the shoulder can relax. So it's one of the things I like to notice when I'm done with a pose like the one we just did is, does it feel like my arm bone has dropped back? Does it feel like instead of my collarbone pulling forward, which often feels that way when I lay down at the beginning of the class, does it feel like that has released a little bit? And the answer might be no, but it's something to pay attention to so that we're kind of, it almost helps too with having a more proper posture in terms of alignment for, you know, optimal internal organ health. So that can be kind of useful information to kind of notice. Now, we're going to do some stuff for our shoulders that's a little bit more movement oriented, and we'll stick a pose in there that we're going to hang out with for a while, a spinal twist, which is one of my favorite poses of all time. So it's generally on the top 10 list. So we're going to start with a movement where we take the arms overhead. So the first thing you want to do is just make sure there's nothing in the pathway of your arms going all the way up and over. And some of us might have some shoulder conditions that limit the range of motion. You just go to the point where you are able to lift your arms reasonably comfortably. So we're going to reach down really firmly. Okay, so this is the first part of the movement. So I'm pulling a little bit on the shoulder to try to reach down, almost like I'm trying to grab my ankles with my hands. And then with that same amount of energy of reaching through the arms, I'm going to lift the arms all the way overhead. Now, at this point, I'm pulling almost like I'm trying to lift my whole upper back up off the floor. And then I just keep going, keep stretching through the range of motion until my thumbs touch the ground. And then I come all the way back. Same notion is that we're stretching the arms as far away from the center point as possible. So we're reaching the whole time. We're moving the arms up and overhead. And I love this movement pattern because it really makes me aware of like how my biceps and triceps work with each other in this movement pattern, in addition to how the shoulder functions to make this movement happen. You can really feel them working with and against gravity to try to hold me and keep me moving in this slow fashion that I've just designated for myself. So one more like that. Now, you're going to pick a side. So I'm going to roll to my left first because this will be the easiest side for me to demonstrate, and then you'll know what we're doing. And then we need a head support. So I'm going to use my blanket because I'm going to save the pillow for later. You'll see. So I'll get back to this guy. Oh, this will be better up here. Okay. So this next part is going to be basically making an arc over the head. So again, you're going to make sure that you have enough space. Now you can sweep your arm down through the bottom of the circle. Right at this point where we're kind of close to the arc, close to shoulder height, right in this kind of lower part, there's a really good opportunity to pinch nerves in the shoulder. So you can also just come straight back, okay? So pick the movement pattern you think is best for your shoulder. We're going to reach all the way around, and either case, my arm must have gotten longer. The bottom half of the movement is very soft. So top part, we're really reaching all the way through the range of motion. Yeah, I keep running out of space. And then the bottom half of the motion, we're staying really stable. So reach and sweep back and reach. Now we're going to do this one more time, but we're going to turn it into a spinal twist. So we're going to reach, and then as we get to that apex, we're going to roll the upper back down to the floor. So this might just be enough, like just doing that. You can wrap the legs around one another. So my favorite is to put something under the bottom leg and then swing the top leg over. So there's a little bit of support, but I also can add just a little bit of, I like having that top leg drop over. It feels nice in the outer hip. Now, if this is too spicy, you can back it off by putting more support underneath, right? So if the support's under the hip, that's going to be a lot less spicy than if it's under the knee. So you just find the right amount so that there's a sense that you're relaxing into the twist and nothing's being overly tugged on. We're going to stay with this guy for about 4 minutes. Just breathing and hanging out with this twist. Now, if you get any numbness or tingling in your fingers, particularly these first 3, but it could be any of them, that, again, is because we're pinching something coming out of the neck. So there's all kinds of nerves that come out of the neck, and then there's this little opening between the collarbone and the shoulder blade and the arm bone where the nerves go through so they can go down the arm, and then in some cases they go through the side of the chest and other places. So most of the ones we're feeling, if we have numbness in the fingers, are the ones that go down the arm. So if you readjust the arm, adjust the shoulder, that should take that out of the, you should feel your fingers come back to life. That's where I'm trying to go. Just not articulating that well, but it should, you want to make sure that you are getting good, good nervous system circulation through your arm. There's a lot of complexity to the neck and the shoulder joint, and you know, not just muscularly, which is, it's very complex in that way, but also there's some really huge artery and vein and neural pathways that come through this area. It's good to have a healthy amount of respect for your neck and your shoulder. So we just got a wee bit longer here. Take a big breath, and then we're gently bringing ourselves back. Now I'm going to bring myself back by bringing the legs back to the center so that I take all of the pressure away, and then I'm going to move my arm bone. This feels really good to me. Just stick the arm up in the air and kind of shake it. The shaking will get a little bit more pronounced as they go along, so that I can get a sense that the little bones are rattling. And then just let the arm kind of fall and notice I did a bunch of stuff with my right arm I haven't done with my left arm yet. Is there a difference between my right arm and my left arm? And you know, the information that we're receiving is coming from the fascia. So the neural pathways that return information to our brain, generally speaking, go through the fascia. Most of them are in that. Fascia is connective tissue that lives under the skin. It wraps around muscles. It connects the muscles together. It's basically, we're a sweater of fascia. Everything else is just stuck in that sweater, or net, if you want to think about it that way. So the information that we're getting when we perceive, is my right arm longer than my left arm, is just coming from the fascia. So we're perceiving how the connective tissue is experiencing the pose that we just did. I think that's really fascinating, and I'm into it. So I like to take a few moments and feel, and my right shoulder is definitely more pleasantly warm. There's a nice kind of pleasant warmth to the muscle area there, and it feels a little bit longer. It's pleasant. This is the main thing. So I can do the other arm reasonably comfortably because I know I didn't do anything weird with the first arm. But if when I come out of a yoga pose, if something feels sore or tender, then I try to do the pose differently on the other side and see if I am able to avoid the soreness, right? And then that teaches me a little bit. So speaking of which, we're going to do the other side. So we've got to create a situation where we give ourselves plenty of room. And again, I'm going to support my head so it stays pretty neutral. With my right arm now on the bottom and the left arm now doing all the work, I'm going to go over my head, and then the bottom half of that circle is very soft. So I'm reaching the whole time I'm doing this shoulder height to shoulder height movement, and then bringing it back, okay? So we're going to do this twice more. That last one of those is going to be the one that turns into the twist. So here it comes right here. Stretch, 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 stretch. And as I get to that point, I'm coming around with it. Okay. And this is where I'll make any necessary adjustments with the pillows or the blankets. Hopefully I'm not totally off your screen. I think I'm probably quite a bit off your screen, actually. Let me adjust my position here so that I'm a little bit closer to being on screen. This is the trouble with the with cameras, phones, and other things. So, finding the right position so you can stay on the screen. So we're just going to relax for a few minutes. Oh, you scared me there, Sav. Oh. We're going to stay for one more minute, yogis. Okay, we're coming on back. So again, I'm going to start with my leg, bringing that back, and then everything else kind of follows. All right. So, taking a moment to do a little movement, and then to notice how to go. And again, we're in this restorative kind of mindset. It definitely, if you've got a busy brain like I do, it takes a while to kind of get down to this gear level, but it's nice to kind of cruise in this sort of restorative space. Now, we're going to come to a seated position. We'll do a little movement for our neck and some little cat-cow things while we're seated, but if you would rather If you don't love the seated cat-cows, you can certainly do some on your hands and knees. And then join me when we get to the neck part. Ugh. Now, one of the things that helps with seated poses is to elevate the hips a little bit. So if you take a blanket and you fold it so that it's got, it's like, I don't know, maybe an inch or so. Maybe some blankets are a little thicker. You might get as much as 2 inches. You just need a little elevation. So then rather than sitting in the middle of the blanket, you're going to sit right on the edge so that it elevates the sit bones. And this sort of magically helps, for many of us, helps the knees drop down and the spine to find a tall space. So instead of the spine feeling like it has to round, we can get a little bit more movement. So we're going to do these little cat-cow movements seated. So you're pushing the rib cage forward and kind of fold in, bring the pelvis with you. And then let the pelvis fall back and arch the back. And this is just really gentle movement back and forth. We're not trying to be extreme here. I have a bigger range of motion when I do them on my hands and knees. But sometimes I like to shake things up and do them a little differently on different days. Keep everybody, all my muscles surprised. There's this really funny cartoon series called the Awkward Yeti, I think is what it's called. And it's a cartoon series where all of this big blue Yeti, all of his internal organs have conversations with each other. So ever since then, I have this, and maybe it was before that, maybe that's why I like the cartoons, because it kind of makes sense to me. I have this notion that like all my body parts are, like coworkers in the little factory that is me. And they're having conversations about like, space and tightness and other things. In any case, I'll just let you go find that online and delight yourself in that. Okay, so I'm sitting up nice and tall. I'm going to try to keep my shoulders neutral. So I'm resting my palms really gently on my thighs for now. And then I've just dropped my chin forward. Now sometimes I feel like my back wants to follow me, so I'm going to be a little extra, make a little extra effort to keep my spine nice and tall. And then I'm just going to loll my head around the shoulders. So I'm going over one shoulder, back to the center and over the other. Now again, this area right here in the front coming down, this is sensitive. So be mindful of like how far back do I go? And if the side where you're kind of going towards, so for example, as I come over here, I feel a stretch on my right side, but some people will feel pinching in here. Elevate your head a little bit. So rather than kind of be right up against your shoulder, you just give yourself a little bit more room. Make sure that you're not pinching anything. Okay. Because again, this little area right in this side of the neck is quite sensitive. Just have a little respect for how much space it's willing to give us. All right, so as I'm rolling back and forth, I'm looking for places that feel a little tighter. Like, is the right side tighter or the left side tighter? Everything feels pretty good to me today, but I'm gonna do one little stretch for each. So I'm gonna roll my head so that I feel a stretch that connects this collarbone to this portion of my skull right here behind my jawbone. I'm just gonna take this arm and reach it out so I can pull the collarbone away from that area a little bit. And as soon as I feel that little like micro beginning of a stretch, I'm pausing right there. I'm not trying to get too crazy. As it lets go, I can take my head a little further over. But again, always just at the barest hint of sensation. And then I'm going to let my head roll a little bit further around, now there's a muscle that connects my shoulder blade to the back of my skull. If I lift my shoulder blade up, I feel how that got softer. And as I draw the shoulder blade down, again, I'm going for like that barest hint of sensation connecting this part of my skull to my shoulder blade. And those are just places that kind of become chronically tight in many cases. Okay, so I'm going to roll my head just a little bit toward the back, float it up for a second and see what happened. And right now it feels like my right shoulder is lower than my left. So again, this is information that's coming from the connective tissue, from the fascia that lives in this area, sending a signal to my brain. I bet you if I like were to measure, it wouldn't be that different, although it might be a little bit. Sometimes we really release tension, and there is a little bit of a difference. Okay, so I'm going to take my head the other way. I'm going to start with this guy in the front. This side is usually not as sensitive as the other side, but today it's a little sensitive. So I'm going to back off just a little bit. Try to find a place where I feel the stretch, but I'm not feeling super duper intense there. Again, when we're looking at connective tissue and making changes to tension levels in the body and levels of like this kind of information where we feel like the body's gotten more relaxed, what probably is really happening is that we're hydrating. we're producing layers of fluid in between these places. So we're not trying to make the tissue longer, but what we are trying to do is create a mechanism, stimulate this area to produce or to attract water to itself so that the layers move a little more smoothly on top of one another, and then it feels like we've gotten a release. This is what the latest kind of science, particularly in the kind of avenue of physical therapy or movement therapies, seems to indicate. There are some interesting, I'm oversimplifying a lot of the information there, but there are some indications that that's really what we're after, is creating just a more fluidity of movement. Okay, so I'm done both sides. Hopefully you've done your sides and you've kind of figured out the amount of intensity. And then notice, like, does this feel pleasant and nice to live in? This shoulder situation that we're in. All right, we're gonna do a forward bending pose, and this is the point where you might want to kind of get a bunch of pillows or a chair or something like that, because you want to be able to kind of lean into support. Okay, so I'm going to leave this little blanket underneath my hips, and then I'm going to bring my feet together in this butterfly shape, and then my hips will come forward a certain amount, and then from here I want to create a stack of things to lift some props up to me. So I'm going to build a little structure. So that when I lean forward, I have something to lean on, right? Where it doesn't feel like my back is being overly changed. So if I didn't have a bunch of little pillows and props, then I might instead stack up a bunch of couch cushions or pull a chair over to me, kind of fit my legs under the chair, and then you can use the seat of the chair as your place to rest your forehead. Couches work really great if you've got a couch in your room and you can get your legs up underneath it. Some couches are higher than others. So you're just kind of finding where is a place where I can land, where I don't feel too much strain in my back. So we're not going for strain, we're going for support. In a second I'm going to put my forehead back down, but I want to chat you guys up a little bit. So once we're here, we also want to notice, like, how are my hips doing? Do I need to support up underneath my knees? So my thigh is touching the ground up to about there. So my knee isn't really feeling any pressure, but if your knee is feeling pressure, put some support underneath so that the thigh is resting on something where the knee will feel support. And that can just be a folded blanket or a little throw pillow, whatever you've got. I cross my arms over this pillow so that I have a little zone for breathing. It gets pretty humid breathing in against this pillow. Now, if you don't love this leg position, you can straighten the legs out instead of doing this one. For about half the time we're going to stay. So it's a good time to kind of check in and just make sure that you're finding yourself able to relax. And then notice too, should I add some more support? Does everything feel like it's well supported? And then you're also allowed to pause the pose for a little while and come back if it feels like it's overwhelming you. So sometimes these poses are supposed to be really gentle, but we all have different bodies, so be careful and kind to yourself. We're going to take a nice big breath. Let go with a big sigh. And then we're going to slowly kind of come out of this pose. And we're not in a hurry. We're just going to take our time. So we have 2 poses left. Not a lot. The first pose that we're going to do is we're going to do an inversion. So there's a lot of different possibilities. But for restorative yoga, generally we kind of link these into 2 categories. So the first is something like legs up the wall. So you can put your hips up against the wall, put your legs straight up the wall, and that's your inversion practice. So it's a partial inversion in that regard, in that the hips and the head are going to be level and the legs are up. So that partial inversions are particularly nice if you have some blood pressure issues and you get dizzy easily. So you can even elevate your head a little bit with legs up the wall because you put a blanket underneath your head. So if that's something that seems like that would be the better option for you, then you can definitely go with that. Second possibility is that we're actually going to elevate the hips. Now you can do that with legs up the wall as well. You just put a folded blanket or even a pillow under your hips to bring the hips up. Or you can do something like what I'm going to do, which is kind of a version of a supported bridge pose. Now, I'm going to do a very mild lift in the hips. I'm going to use a blanket for my hips. And then I'm actually going to build a little structure to throw my legs up and over. So it's a little closer to the legs up the wall, but the legs are going to be over an object. So the object is going to be this pillow. So it's called Stonehenge. And this might become obvious in a second. So I'm building a Stonehenge. I've got 2 posts and then I've got a lintel, right? So I'm going to bring these a little closer together because it'll be sturdier if I do that. Now I'm going to eventually put my legs up and over this. That's the plan. First, I'm going to get myself onto a blanket so that I can have a slightly elevated hip. Okay, so hips level with the ground, partial inversion. Hips elevated even a little bit is a fuller inversion. Okay, so you just want to be mindful of what's right for you. So I'm folding this and I'm actually going to sit on this blanket. I might have to recreate my structure once I get on there. Okay. So I want to sit right on the edge of it so that when I roll down, my hips wind up on it, right? So this is harder to do with blocks because they're not quite as forgiving, but with a blanket, it's not too bad. Okay, so then I'm going to build this kind of pretty close to my hips. I might have to take the pillow down and put it back up, but we're going to find out. Okay, so hopefully I'll be able to rest one leg on top of each. Hold on, I've got to readjust. This is where things get tricky because my little structures fall apart. Okay. Not easy, y'all, not always. Okay. Myself a wider base, and then maybe we can make this work. Oh. All right. Now, if I didn't have the yoga blocks under there, I could just build a stack of pillows. That would have been a little bit easier probably on me, for sure. So my hips are slightly elevated compared to my head, and I'm just letting my legs kind of hang out over the top of this little pillow. You know, again, if I had a wall here, then my legs would be straight up. So people with tight hamstrings, this might be the better option. Sometimes even getting yourself up the wall in that 90-degree angle at the hip can be tricky for people with tight hamstrings. So this might be a really nice option for a lot of reasons. In addition to the fact that I don't have a wall surface nearby that doesn't have, you know, furniture, artwork, inhibiting my path. This is lovely. So we're going to stay with this guy, for like another 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to do a long Shavasana. Stay a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but 5-6 minutes. Now, if you get a sense that you should get out of here for whatever reason, sometimes, like some people are really athletic and their blood pressure is really low for that reason. Some of us might be on medications and that kind of messes with the blood pressure. So if you feel dizzy, you just want to get your hips and your head at the same level. You can roll onto your side and just hang out there. That usually will solve the problem. But again, you're in charge of you. You're in your own living room or whatever. You're in your own space. So do the things that you think are right for you. I would suggest, if you have an intuitive sense of things, go with that. I'm not an authority. So sometimes for me, like the back of my knees sort of lets go after I've been here for a little while, so I can stretch my legs just a little bit further over. And so you can make little modification as you need to kind of make the pose more comfortable. Maybe the legs need to get, or the props need to get closer to you, or you need to get a little farther away from them. So, without fidgeting a lot, just make a tiny shift and see if it makes life a little bit better. But I find that as I hang out in poses, sometimes my body moves, right? There's a little bit of a release in tissue, and something that's felt comfortable initially now no longer feels comfortable. It's sort of like that story of the princess and the pea, right? The girl gets into the bed to go to sleep, everything seems okay, and then after she's lain there for a little while, she realizes that there's something in the mattress. It's just a lentil, but it feels like a boulder, right? So this restorative yoga can be a little bit like that, where like just the tiniest little wrinkle in the blanket cannot feel so crazy at first, but after you lay with it for a little bit, you notice the difference, right? Slightly different height of one leg versus the other, things like that. So don't be afraid to adjust those things that might come up, and then come back to being quiet. Once you get yourself physically settled, it's nice to just notice the breath. You don't have to muck with it too much. Just let it be deep, rhythmic, and smooth. We're going to stay for about another minute or so. Now, what I want to do is the most gentle transition into my final relaxation that I can. So I'm going to take my legs down from where they are, and I'm going to try to just kind of move my blocks out of the way, and then pull my pillow back up underneath there. And then I'm going to take my hips up and slip this blanket out from underneath my hips. And this I'm going to make into a little head support. And then one of the things that's kind of fun, especially in the wintertime, in the summertime, I don't love this as much because everything is too hot, but in the winter, let me just scoot up a little bit because my feet are running into furniture. In the winter time, or when it's not too crazy hot out, I like to take a blanket and put it underneath my head and then take one little section of the blanket like this and bring it over so that it becomes like a little eye pillow, and then tuck it in around the edges. And then take the second half of the blanket and just kind of cuddle it around. It's sort of like making a pod around your head. But for some reason, I find it very, I like having I guess maybe part of the issue is like, I like having a little bit less sensory information coming through my ears. So that might be why I like this pod, is because it sort of blocks out some of the noise. And then it blocks out some of the light because I can use this blanket. And if you have an eye pillow, you can put that on top even. Or you can just use the eye pillow, but kind of creates a little sensory deprivation chamber, almost. Not quite, but closer. And so that feels very comforting. In the summer, it's, again, like I said, it's way too warm. But now that it's getting a little cooler where I am, it feels really nice. So if it's still really hot where you are, maybe don't just put an eye pillow over your eyes. But if you're up for it, make a little cocoon, a little pod. And then we're just going to let the body relax completely. Now, if your heels don't touch the ground, definitely put a blanket under your heels. So it just depends on how your props kind of fall and how big they are as to how many things you'll need. Then take your time and adjust everything so it's just right. And then we're just going to let go. Ooh. One more time. We're going to let the body relax completely. Once you've got all your props kind of arranged, take a few moments and just start, like maybe down at the tips of your toes. You can spread out the toes and then let the toes relax. And just become aware of the relaxed toes, like they're almost sort of falling away from each other. They're so relaxed. And that then engenders a little relaxation into the soles of the feet. And Feel the metatarsals, the little bones in the center of the foot. Just kind of gently release away from one another, widening and softening the foot. Feel the heels grow a little heavier into the floor. And the calf muscles relax. As calf muscles relax, the shins relax. And feel the knee joint gently supported, so that all of the tissue in the calf muscles and the shin, and then also in the thigh, is able to let go. Feel the muscles on the top of the thigh relax gently. And feel the muscles on the back of the thigh relax. Relax the groin muscles. And feel the hip socket itself deepen gently, allowing the leg bone to gently release backwards into the hip. Feel the muscles across the lower abdomen below the belly button. We're just letting go and sinking back into the bowl of the pelvis. Feel all the muscles in the upper abdomen above the belly button gently release, so that the ribs are able to float a little bit more freely. And gently feel the breath moving this whole area, rib cage, belly. Gentle wave-like motion. The shoulders relaxing and the arm bones. Feel the palms of the hands release, so that all of the little metacarpals, the bones right in the center of the palm, are able to let go. And the fingers gently fall apart from one another. Relax. Feel the neck and the throat relax. The jaw relax so that the teeth are parted. The tongue is gentle and relaxed in the mouth. The lips are soft and fluffy. Make sure the eyes are gently relaxed. Forehead is smooth. going to take a moment just to notice the breath again. Take a breath so deep you can feel it to your toes. Let it go with a big sigh. Then you can wiggle your fingers and toes and spread them out. Oh, and do the wrist and ankles. Oh. Stretch your whole body. Oh, now we're going to take our time. But we're going to wind up in a seated position. Oh. And generally it's nice if you sort of let your head be the last thing that comes up. Oh. So thank you for joining me for some restorative yoga. Hopefully you feel slightly restored. It's not a bad thing to do on a Sunday. Get yourself ready for the week. So let's take a big breath together. One more sigh. Namaste, yogis.